Hello, I am going to cover very briefly our discussion about Chapter 5. And as I mentioned in class, I'm going to select only a segment of what we covered and discuss it in the video. So as you know, if you have been to class, we have spent a very little amount of time on Chapter 5, which is on human sexuality, because of time constraints. And this is a chapter that is not difficult to understand. It's more of a chapter that is content heavy. It's got some content that's important to pay attention to, put together, and remember for the exam. A lot of it is useful and relevant to real life, so I hope it's going to make that a little easier to memorize. But I would like to just very briefly mention our discussion about teenagers and sexual activity. We talked about the fact that research shows that European teenagers have lower rates of unwanted pregnancy and abortions than American teenagers. We thought that was an interesting finding, and we talked about some of the cultural factors that may be responsible for that discrepancy. And then we moved on and discussed a slide that basically had a heading, correlates associated with sexual restraint. That was the heading. So if you're looking at your notes, that may be a useful place to open up right now. And I'd like you to see the 5 points that were made in class. And again, this is not difficult to understand. This is just information to try to remember. And one useful way to remember, and you can try it out and see if it works for you, is to visualize the information. So for example, we talked about religious beliefs being a correlate of sexual restraint, meaning students or people who go to church, a synagogue, a mosque, or have some other religious belief, tend to have lower rates of sexual activity engagement. And so one way to remember is to visualize a synagogue or a church or a mosque, or to think of someone you may know who attends, let's say, a synagogue services, who would be the kind of person who you believe is very strongly invested in his or her faith, and associate that person in your mind going to the synagogue with not having sex yet, or whatever you want that heading to be for yourself that represents this idea that people are sexually restrained. The second correlate was having a father in the house. So again, you can think of a family that you know, your own, somebody else's, where there is father who is very active and present, and thinking about how that may impact the timing or the degree to which teenagers may postpone having sex in that household. And so it goes. Okay, we talked about volunteer activity, sort of the teenagers who are busy volunteering, don't have time for sex. That's one of the correlates. So again, you can imagine, have a visual imagery kind of depicting that kind of scenario. We also talked about abstinence education and said, yes, that will postpone having sex. However, the best practices suggest that teenagers should receive abstinence. If they are receiving abstinence education, they should also receive additional kind of safe sexual practices education, so that when they do decide to have sex, they actually know and are skilled at keeping themselves safe. And finally, we talked about high intelligence being a correlate of sexual restraint. And again, you can think about a student who is bookish, intellectual, has intellectual interests, and again have maybe a specific person in mind or have a book in mind that helps you associate the item of high intelligence to sexual restraint. So these are just some ideas. There are going to be more coming up in the subsequent chapters. I know that not everything works for everybody, but I wanted to put it out there. You can try it out. Maybe you have already tried it out. It works for you. That's great. It doesn't work for you. Let's try something else. Good luck, guys, and I will see you next time.